You're listening to the Fan2Fan Podcast, and on this episode, we're talking to comic book writer J. Michael Donohue, and we're talking about the Kickstarter campaign for his horror anthology, Morsels, the Main Course. We talk about writing, horror movies, getting Kickstarter campaigns together, working with artists, and much more. Here we go. You're listening to the Fan2Fan Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Bernie Gonzalez. With me today, co-host Pete Charbonneau, and we've got J. Michael Donohue as a guest on the podcast. Jay, thanks for joining us.
Hey, not a problem. I'm excited to be here.
For folks that are not aware of Jay and his work, he's a comic book writer. You can find him on Instagram and Twitter at J. Michael Donohue. Check out his website, jmichaeldonohue.weebly. He's been featured in several anthologies, including Together Forever, Tag Along, Rebecca Tales of Resonant, and Crushed. Your Kickstarter, successful last year, 2022, was Morsels. You're doing it again. Morsels, the Main Course, another Kickstarter influenced by Tales from the Crypt, Creepshow, Tales from the Hood. So we've got to talk about this campaign, your influences, and how you got here. So Jay, the stage is yours. Tell us about Morsels.
If you want the elevator pitch for Volume 1, I used to say it was a collection of 8 delectably bite-sized horror stories. So delicious, you'll be screaming for more. Really, the idea for that just kind of came to, I had a bunch of these short horror stories that I just really enjoyed doing. A lot of them gave me an opportunity to work with a variety of different artists. Worked with Jay Sheik, Christian Dabari, Adam Cahoon, who is currently doing The Nasty for Vault Comics. He's the artist on that. With John Lees, just a variety of people. And it was really cool because I got to play around with different genres, and I really liked twisting the different genres and trying to make the reader think one thing's going to happen and totally just kind of flipping it on them. Sometimes it was successful, sometimes I'm not, I feel like with anything. First, it was just going to kind of be a one-off, just a way to kind of show, hey, here's some stories that I've done. This is what I can do. But I just enjoyed it so much. I had so much fun working with different artists. And so I had a couple longer stories. So I just kind of had the idea that, this third one's going to be the main course. It's 3 meatier, scarier stories, that are so scary that you'll scream till you pop. That's kind of the elevator pitch for that one.
Let's say, no, this is great because I'm in Phoenix, and so I haven't had dinner yet. So this is perfect. I got some morsels that we can do here.
Lots of food talk
as we dive a little deeper into this Kickstarter campaign that you've got. So the first volume, I think was it 8 stories? I believe you said
yes,
3 to 10 pages?
8 different. I think anywhere from 3 to 10 pages was the most. Yeah.
Now, was the thinking with this volume, the stories are longer. What are some of the challenges in terms of writing something that's 3 to 10 pages as opposed to having a little more time? Do you enjoy one or the other? Is this just kind of how in your writing process, the story goes?
It's really just dependent, but I honestly love doing both. I got a lot of really good advice when I was starting off, and this is something I would probably tell anybody that's trying to get into comic book writing. Everybody has these grand ideas of, I've got a 22 issue, series, and this is great, and pitch it, and hey, you should pay us to make this and this and that. And when you're Joe Schmo or they don't know you, you don't have that fan base. It's just not going to happen. And to do it on yourself is, extremely daunting. So the advice I got is to start small. So I literally was just I had this idea. Together Forever, which is the first story in Morsels Volume 1, is actually the first comic story I wrote and had produced. And it's kind of funny. I think a lot of the stuff that I've had so far I owe to Jay Sheik, who is the artist on that. And it's probably is the main story that a lot of people always comment on from that volume, that book. And it was funny. I had written it as an idea, just sitting in the back of my head, put it out on Twitter, back when it wasn't such a hellscape, but it was just say, hey, I'm trying to start off. I have this 3-page comic. Anybody out there want to collaborate? Jay, hey, yeah, he was hungry. He wanted to do, some art. He'd been working, threw it out, say, hey, I'd be interested. Checked out his stuff, really dug it. So we started talking. He did the 3-page story. I loved it. And I was just kind of well, I have it. Cool. Move on. And I think just after he finished it, it was funny. He's like, hey, I have this place that I've done work with. It's hyperepics.com. And it's actually a really sweet website. Everything is 3-page comics, web comics on there. That's their shtick. And they actually do like they have somebody that kind of does a music, like almost like a instrumental music that goes over it while you're reading it. And so he's like, hey, I'd like to pitch that there. Do you mind? And in my head, I'm like, they're not going to want it, but sure, go ahead, do what you want. Don't get off my back. And I was shocked that he wrote me the next day. He's like, hey, they love it. They want to put it in there. I was like, oh, okay, awesome, sure. And so that was really cool just to see it online. And then it just kind of snowballed from there. But the biggest thing is I love writing those stories is because it really, as a storyteller, makes you really look at what's necessary, what's not. Because obviously I have 3 pages to tell a story, and it's extremely hard to tell it with 20 pages, 30 pages, 100 pages. So it definitely made me think more economically with what I'm doing, writing my stories. But I definitely have loved in these next stories of getting to have a little more time to really, lure the reader in and to kind of pull, try and pull the wool over their eyes. So I think that's been a lot of fun. And there's one story in particular that I'm doing with Alex Cormack. I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but he did like Sea of Sorrows, Road of Bones with Rich Douek, Drive Like Hell. He's got coming out with Rich Douek soon. He's a fantastic artist. And this story I've been cooking up and sitting with him. I've been waiting for so long to do with him. So I'm super, super excited.
So obviously you've got your story and you're writing it, and you may have a vision in your head of how it might look like when because you're working with a really eclectic group of artists on this in both of these volumes. So I can imagine that's got to be very exciting to see them take your writing and then visualize it for you with those different styles.
I'm always blown away in seeing that because I feel like I can have a vision in my head and when I'm writing, and I've just been extremely lucky, knock on wood. Every artist that I've worked with has far surpassed my expectations on what, that the stories could be. Like I remember it was a fun one. And another one that felt really good with me is Jeremy Stimser, who is a storyboard artist. He's done multiple things for Marvel shows, a couple of different, multiple Marvel movies and things like that as one of the storyboard artists. He did Crushed in the first volume. And that one's very special to me because that was one of the first times like we had kind of chatted about things and we're kind of friendly, but he came to me and was like, hey, I really like what you're doing. Hey, write me a story, so to have an artist come to me and say, hey, I want to do something with you. I mean, like I was over the moon. That's awesome.
Are you kind of just giving them carte blanche to kind of run with it? Or do you have like a little, collaborative meeting to kind of talk through maybe some of your ideas of what you think it might look like visually? Or do you want them to kind of just, use their creativity and come back and be okay with being excited?
Honestly, generally it's been putting that trust in the artist and kind of letting them have free reign for the most part. Obviously, if there is anything that is very specific to the story, I mean, obviously I make notes that, hey, we need to get this in here, I think like anybody, but I like to look at it and try to really look at it. It is a collaboration. So it's not a dictatorship. It's not hey, you draw this, this. Like I want them, because they know the art style. They know the best way to, camera angle and the best way to draw and tell this story. So I definitely leave it open. I've also been lucky with a lot of the artists that I've worked with. I've kind of known and we've chatted and we've done stuff or we've done something smaller so that we already kind of are familiar with each other. So then it's much easier to kind of say, hey, here's the script, go nuts. Let's see what you got.
I'll say as a comic book artist, I appreciate you doing that. And if you've ever read an Alan Moore script, for example, in the comics world, if he's working with Boland or some of the very, amazing artists he's worked with, where they might appreciate the fact that he's kind of painting the scene by describing what should be there. There's that other part of me that shakes at that because I'm like, no. Like I want to riff. I want it to be jazz where I can kind of see where it's going. And as long as I kind of know, yep, we're trying to go for a tension-filled vibe and, what you've been able to explore with more pages in Morsels 2, where you have more time to kind of create that landscape you want. That's why I have to imagine, again, speaking for all comic book artists, I'm like, oh, yeah, good. That must be fun for them to then work with you because you're giving them some runway, some space to reinvent, to play around with the story, the concept that you threw out there.
I've changed the way that I write scripts. So as a writer, starting to want more control, at least in the writing stage, of breaking it down by panels and this and that and close-ups and medium shots and whatever. But I still leave it open, try and leave it open to the artist to, no, maybe this is better, or, this angle is better. And I try to always have a dialogue with my artists too, because like even on one of the stories, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, which is going to be, in volume 2, I worked with Federica Mancine. She's the one that did the art and everything for that story. We hadn't met before. I just kind of saw her stuff, thought, hey, it looks really good, reached out to her. We kind of started talking. And it was interesting because, one, like I said, we weren't familiar with each other. And it was really a lot of fun to get something back. And I even said, hey, this is kind of how I wanted it. She's like, well, but if you do it from this angle, it doesn't make sense. And then when it's a learning experience for me. I was like, okay, yeah, you're right. It doesn't make sense. So I like that kind of, that was a fun collaboration and kind of a, discussion on how it is. Because like I said, I may think I know what I'm talking about. And in essence, I don't. So
before you started kind of getting into, before Morsels or even any of the other projects, what was your writing background? Were you writing short stories? Were you writing novels? Were you doing like academic writing?
I've always dabbled in different writing. Like I've done short stories. I've done like student film scripts. I was kind of, I guess, the writer for a group of mine when we got into college. There were 3 of my, really good friends that already kind of had like a filmmaking trio. So they kind of let me tag along to learn stuff. So then I kind of started writing my own, having my buddy kind of film it and direct it. I try to direct some of my own stuff. I'm a terrible director. I'm fine with just being the writing, but it's all a learning experience too. So it's all a good experience. And so, yeah, short stories I wrote for an online website called the Film Yap. It's kind of a local entertainment website here from Indianapolis. They review, movies, DVD releases, and, do commentaries and things like that. So I did that for about 6 or 7 years on and off. I've always had ideas for graphic novels, comics. I've written things off and on, but I think probably over the last 5 years is when I really said, okay, I really want to get stuff made, and kind of made that adjustment to say, okay, I can't come in here with a 200-page graphic novel. You know what I mean? It's just not realistic. I can't come in here with a 6-issue arc. I'm not there yet. So then that's when I started kind of doing the short stories and kind of building up and doing different things. So
I appreciate the approach you took, because like you were saying, if you have that graphic novel in you, it's still there. It's maybe just not the thing you want to come out of the gate with. And through Morsels 2, you kind of start creating that proof of concept where people can get a sense for your writing style, what you enjoy, the type of collaborations. So, you kind of hope that, you keep building inertia towards other projects. Is kind of that your goal to stay in comics? I guess in some ways I'm asking why comics as a medium for your writing?
I like the collaboration. I've always been a comic reader on and off all through my life, whether it be, superhero comics. I've kind of fallen off those wagons probably a little bit. I think over the years, I kind of get back and on and off, but horror comics, like Steve Niles is probably one of my favorite comic book writers. I love all of his horror work. Clay McLeod Chaplin, I even he's a guy that's doing a novelist and a comic book writer. He's done stuff for Marvel, some really great stuff, but then also has a couple books that have blown me away. So I've definitely, as a writer, have toyed with trying to get more back into prose as well, not going just one way or the other, but maybe doing some short stories, or novellas or something like that, and kind of working up to something bigger.
Do you really kind of just stick around in the horror genre? Is that your preferred area?
Yeah, it's.
I don't want to, in case you have that romantic comedy in you, Jay, I don't want to take it away from you,
No, did you mention that one of your stories has a little bit of a Sleepless in Seattle element to it with the kaiju?
Yeah, so it probably ended up being more Godzilla meets Carrie in a way. But when I first set out, the idea was, what if I had a story of a Sleepless in Seattle meets Godzilla, during a kaiju attack?
Well, the mashup.
And so, but yeah, there have been multiple story ideas that I've had that I'm like, okay, this is, and then somehow it just always verges back to horror in some way.
Remember, you can find the Fan2Fan podcast at www.fan2fan.com.
fan2fanpodcast.com. Facebook, just search Fan2Fan Podcast. That's FAN, the number 2, FAN.
On Instagram at Fan2Fan Podcast.
Or on Twitter at Fan2Fan Podcast.
We'd love to hear from you, so send a message and let us know what you think of the show. Thanks.
And now, on with the show.
You picked the hardest. I think you're playing the game on hard mode, Jay, because I think with horror, especially in the comics world, it kind of reminds me, and again, this is from, writing and drawing my own comics, where I can see how that's kind of connected to folks that talk about comedy is really difficult in film, but comedy can be so specific that it may not translate. And with horror, it's like it's harder sometimes to do it in comics because, to give examples like action, you have no budget in comics. So, you could outdo Michael Bay because you could have all the X-Men fighting aliens, fighting Galactus, fighting the Kree and the Skrull and Atlanteans. It doesn't matter. It's just the poor artist's carpal tunnel that's really going to suffer. But yeah, you could do all that in a widescreen format, just like you can do something that's a little bit more intimate or something that's more indie, like Love and Rockets, something that's more fantasy based. But then with horror, again, you're playing it in hard mode because now you're playing with cadence and rhythm and trying to build tension. Do you take that into account when you break out a script, either with page turns or panel breakdowns to kind of create that rhythm that you can control more maybe in a movie? Music, atmosphere, pacing, you could do that. But in comics, you're kind of at the whim of the person who could breeze through a 10-page story in 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah, and I think that's it. As I'm writing, I've definitely tried to be more aware of page turns, what's going to keep the reader going. And like you said, I think even like movies and comics, I think they're similar. Is I've been so bad, especially with movies and things that you watch something and maybe it's all about the mood you were in, the group you were in, of how you take the movie. And I feel like so much is that there's so much media and I know people hate to say content, but lack of a better word, things that we are just gorging ourselves on, that sometimes it takes a minute. Like the first time, like I didn't see it when I was younger. I saw probably the last few years, but I would say like the Exorcist 3.
The creator of the original Exorcist is back with a terror unlike any ever known. Just behind this door. William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist 3.
Just a stunning, amazing movie. Absolutely stunning. Down to the acting, storytelling, everything. Like, I just absolutely, love that movie. And it's really funny because when I watched it a few years ago, it's like, everybody talks about this. I think I steered clear because I'm like, oh, it's a third Exorcist movie.
Yes.
Like, that's going to be great. And it is. I mean, that was, bad on my part to just dismiss it. But I first watched it, I was like, okay, yeah, that's pretty good. Okay, I like things about it. Well, it needed to do this. But like, I just rewatched it today and there was just something about it. I don't know if there's a mood there. I'm just like, it just hit me harder. And I'm like, oh, okay, I see why people love this. Like, this goes hard. And I mean, and maybe I'm missing it, but like, everybody talks about obviously the movie on a whole and how good it is. But God, Brad Dourif's performance in that movie is just insane. I mean, next level insane. And I don't hear a lot of people talk about him, more specifically. I feel like he kind of gets stuck as he's Chucky.
Yes. Isn't there like that one shot in the hallway? It almost gives me goosebumps to think about it because there's a cinematographer out there right now that's listening that's like, Bernie, you have no clue what you're talking about. And to that person, I would say, yes, you're right. But I know how it made me feel. And it's very like clinical and it's in a hospital. So no pun intended. Like these nurses are just... Sorry. Yes. Let me get a couch. But like these nurses are just walking across the hallway. And again, talk about timing. Like it's kind of setting this expectation for the viewer. Something should be happening. The scenes don't linger like this. And then all of a sudden, it's akin to the shot in the first movie where Reagan is going through the possession and all of a sudden you see the shot. Did I see it? Did I dream it? Was that demon face there? But it was thrown in there with just enough timing that it makes you a bit unsettled. And that hallway shot, I always remember from the third one thinking, whoa, like that was so well done. That's where, again, if even if you're watching the third Exorcist movie, when you could arguably, say, should there be a second, let alone a third Exorcist movie? It's like, but when you do it right.
So batshit crazy.
It's bonkers. Yeah,
it's doing. Bonkers. That you're like, I love it. And then other people are like, why? And why would you do that? Friedkin apparently was not very nice about that movie.
I think he was also not nice about a lot of things, but he had earned
not one to hold his opinion back on too much.
Yes,
I mean, not to get us too diverted off on Exorcist movies, but I will say, that in Exorcist 3, I mean, like, jump scares get a bad rap, and rightly so, because you can look at it as a cheap way to try and just get an audience reaction. But if you're gonna have a jump scare like that one in Exorcist 3 is got to be up there.
Yeah. You sit on this wide shot, solid shot of the hallway, and it's like you do for like probably a good or it feels like 10 minutes, but maybe 5 minutes, but you're just on there, and it's like the security guard's there, and he's just doing what he's doing, and the nurse says, well, then you're hearing this like creaking noise, and the nurse is like doing her thing, and then she like disappears off screen, comes back on screen, goes into this room, and it's just ice, like, oh, it's getting breaking apart, and then this you kind of get a little bit of a tension break, because it's like you get a jump scare of a patient in the room, and he's just, vulgar and mean and this and that. And so she goes back out. And what I never realized is the room, like I said, there's things I missed the first time viewing, is that the room she is, the jump scare comes from is the priest's room that was killed. And so it was a crime scene, and it was locked. And so you see her go, and then she goes back, and then, the security guard comes back, and then he leaves, and then she goes around, and because she notices something, and there's a couple cuts, but generally it's almost all that hallway, just that wide shot. And then just seeing her come around, you see her from like the side, look in the room, because she thinks she sees something in there, turns on the light, nothing, turns off the light, closes the door, locks it, and she turns, and immediately as you turn, the door opens, and it's just the body coming out with those huge shears behind her, but it like zooms in on the room.
Yeah.
And that's what you're just like, oh God, look, knowing what was happening, you're kind of like, happened already. Like, come on.
That shot is as well done, transition coming here, as Jay's first Kickstarter, Morsels, which had over 300 Kickstarter backers, over 8,500 that he brought in for that. So now with Morsels, the main course, 56-page comic, Jay, zombies, mutants, monsters. Oh my, you're going to expand on the world. First one was kind of the appetizers. This is the main course. Also saw in there that you kind of threw out the tease that maybe there's a dessert menu underway. So I think, that's kind of your plan, right? Like, keep using this inertia, the backers from the initial one, 300, you're already, with 20 days to go, the day of this recording, you've got 80 backers, just shy of 2,500 to your goal of a little bit over 12,000. You've been anointed by the Kickstarter gods as a project that we love.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited. I mean, there's a lot of nerves, a lot of anxiety, and a lot of, maybe I think I got spoiled a little bit. I did that first Kickstarter, had never done one before. Was really excited about the book. There were a lot of people I was kind of working with that were kind of running at the same time. So we did a lot of cross promotion. I hit my goal and some. And so this time around, it's been a little bit slower, but the atmosphere, the economy is different. So, I'm coming out swinging until that timer clicks down to 0. And, it does break your heart a little bit if you don't have, a project hit its goal. I've worked with, or, I know other indie comic creators that have hit them, haven't, so on and so forth. Yeah, but the way I look at it is, if we don't, then we retool, I regroup, how can we make this more, affordable, easier for people? But as of right now, like I said, I feel like we are doing well. We're doing solid. I've got a lot of cool backers. We have 3 different covers this time. So I've gone up from 2. Adam Cahoon did the Sea Monster cover, which I love. That's kind of the main cover. Skylar Patridge, who is a phenomenal artist. I mean, all 3 of them that did covers are phenomenal. Don't get me wrong. They did kind of the fun concept I come up where it's kind of like this, beautiful woman unzipping her dress, but she's unzipping her skin and there's something else just disgusting underneath. And then the third one was Chris Sheehan, and they did the I call it the late night snack. They like to call it the man eater cover. But they're just all 3 fantastic. And I actually just opened a new tier that's pretty cool. one of the fun things about the first Morsels, and I'm definitely bringing back, is doing kind of fun throwback horror ads. Yeah, and the first one, the centerfold is a Masked Into Way that Adam Cahoon did. That is probably one of my favorite things in that book. And Matt Harding did a little bit of art for one. What was really cool about those ads is that there were some fellow comic creators from books that I loved that let me put little Easter eggs through, kind of gave me permission to do that.
Oh, nice.
That was a ton of fun. Yeah.
I think I saw some nods to some Vault books if I got a few Easter eggs there.
Yep. There's actually going to be Mr. Ghoul's Pawn Shop of Hell.
Okay.
But 7 people, well, actually I'll say 6 because one person already snagged it today, one of the 7, but 6 more opportunities to have your head drawn, or have you drawn as a severed head on the shelf of the ad.
Oh, sweet.
So so you can be immortalized in in the comic forever.
That's some of the fun stuff that you can do with a Kickstarter campaign, right? Because, you obviously it's always trying to come up with new and exciting ways to entice people to part with their hard-earned money to support you. But like to have that, that personal investment, I think is great. And, I think for anyone that is thinking about supporting J. Michael's Morsels, the main course, definitely check out the Kickstarter page. You can see that cover art. You can see just the amazing artists that he's got working with him on this volume. And there's always great new stories out there. I think, to have someone come in and like you're producing all this stuff from your brain that is just aching to get out. And to be able to put that down on the page and to have some of this amazing artwork included with it, I think is an amazing thing. So we definitely encourage anyone out there listening to check out that Kickstarter page just to see, kind of what you're getting. And I think if correct me if I'm wrong, but if you do back the main course, you get a digital copy of the first Morsels, correct?
Yes. Obviously it's kind of a double-edged sword because, you want things to be affordable. You're not trying to gouge people, but obviously, at the same time, you want artists to be paid. Paper stuff has gone, prices have gone up. Shipping, I try to keep down, there's kind of kept that the same. And so definitely, there are some higher tiers like any other, campaign, but I also tried to make sure everybody's getting their value's worth. So, you got the single digital, you got the double digital. Obviously, you can get, your pick of individual copies if you want. In the add-ons, I actually threw up a limited number, I think 50 of issue 1, the physical copy of issue 1 that could be added on if people want it. But then as you go, there's ways to kind of do a cheaper combo of all 3 covers together. I've even got one that's the, smorgasbord, but it's like all 3 books, all 3 prints, a Morsels logo patch that I'm having made that's in production right now. A lot of people really loved the werewolf cover, which I actually have right up here of the first Morsels. But I had that art made into like a pin, and those are in production right now. I definitely want to give people a lot of cool things. I want them to feel as supported as I feel that they're giving me their money. So I want to give them, probably more than what, they're giving. I want to give them all that I can.
Sure. I think what J. Michael is saying is that he is going out of his way to make it worth your while to invest in this project. And I mean, who doesn't want a severed head in a comic book?
That's right.
Exactly.
That's right.
Well, yeah. And I think that's really cool. I also have on there, added on Noah Bailey, who did Murky. It was the last story of the first Morsels. Amazing artist. He was artist on, I don't know if you noticed, but Double Walker, which was through Dark Horse, I believe, Comixology Dark Horse with Michael W. Conrad. Phenomenal horror book. One that really gets under your skin. But they did some stuff on, I think, one of the Wonder Woman specials. So they've collaborated a lot. But Noah Bailey, I mean, his work is just, it's beautiful. And I mean, it's haunting. I just love it. And so we actually have, I think the highest tier, you actually get an original page from Murky.
To echo what Pete was saying, that is one of the unique things, especially about a Kickstarter. And I think in general with comics, where even if there was a director that you loved their work. It's not like you could go to Director Con and go to like Director Alley and be like, hey, Spielberg, so how'd you do that shot? And let's like chit chat about stuff. And, how's your convention pizza? Like, overpriced and overcooked? Like, oh, yeah, like you can't do that. And in the world of comics, you can. Like, it's a bit collapsed in the access that you get to the people who are making these things. And I think that's also reflected in Kickstarters. The artists that are making the stuff that ends up, reflecting what's in your head that's on the page, make things. And the folks that back your vision in the project can have a piece of it, whether it's, their head in the book, or something physical. I think you have all the P's, pin, patches, and prints. So, I mean, it's a little bit of everything that folks can contribute to. And one of our Fan2Fan All-Stars, Joshua Pruitt, he threw out a little teaser for there that I have to read. Morsels is more than just a taste. It's a buffet of dark fiction. I see what you did there, Josh. Short horror comics with all the boring parts cut out. Some go down easy, some stick with you, and if you want to crawl their way back up, taking your guts with them, Josh couldn't have put it any better. People really need to check out Morsels main course. If folks like horror, if they like anthologies, if they like EC Comics, Tales from the Crypt, Tales from the Hood, or they just want their head in a comic, and they can always have that as a hell of an icebreaker anytime they're chit-chatting with someone at a bar. Hey, did you know my head was in a comic? It was. Let me tell you about Morsels 2, the main course. If that doesn't make a good introduction, I don't know what was. So thanks, Jay. Appreciate it, man. Thanks for talking about the Kickstarter and coming on.
No, not a problem at all.